The Texans desperately need a wide receiver this offseason, and I'm going to explain why I think there's a perfect selection in the draft. There's been a lot of players that the Texans have been rumored to in terms of maybe going out and getting T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, George Pickens, DK Metcalf I've been seeing. But you need a wide receiver this offseason because outside of Nico Collins, yeah, you might bring Diggs back, but he's on an ACL tear. 31 years old, only getting older. And then Tank Dell absolutely obliterated his knee last year. Terrible, terrible injury. So outside of that, you don't have anybody. You have maybe Dalton Schultz, who's on an $11 million a year contract, but I have the perfect solution as to who the Texans need to target and go after because it would make perfect sense, and that's Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. When you look at what this offense is made of, the Texans, and let's just put it on the screen. The Texans need to get Emeka Egbuka. Why? Not that I already mentioned that the three wide receivers in the current Texans receiving room are coming off an injury, but it's John Mechie's the only second wide receiver that I think is probably going to be a viable second. But you need somebody else there outside of Nico Collins, right? Egbuka is the perfect fit because not only the connection with Stroud on Ohio State, not only the perfect number 2 to Nico Collins, but his route running and his ability to be in chemistry with his former quarterback at college, that will be something you would love to see on the Texans. And honestly, the problem with this is the fact that you're probably not going to get him at 25, and that's difficult to hear. But the Texans fired their offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick. So this is where I feel like Nick Caserio might actually be more aggressive to go out and get Emeka Egbuka, who CJ Stroud loves. And the thing is, when you fire your offensive coordinator, who wasn't really a bad season, yes, he didn't have a good season, and it was a middle-of-the-pack offense, but because of the conservative play calling, you look at the fact that this Texans offense wants to change the identity of what this team is made of. Basically meaning the offense is going to be pass first. It was run first last year with Joe Mixon. The Texans are looking for an offensive coordinator that will help sling the rock, and that will be a perfect transition, honestly. And looking at an offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly would probably be a perfect fit to go along with Chip Kelly, CJ Stroud, and Emeka Egbuka. Egbuka and Chip Kelly have already been on the same team last year at Ohio State. I would love for the Texans to bring in Chip Kelly, who has a great offensive mind, just a pass-first kind of offense. We saw it with Will Howard. They did run the ball a decent amount, but that's why Joe Mixon is in the backfield for things like that. When Stroud was a pass-first offense in his rookie year, he had a better season, probably because there was no run game for the Texans, which made the offense better. The two problems you need to really address is the fact that you have no money in the offseason, and not only you don't have many weapons, but the offensive line was terrible last year. And when you look at a terrible offensive line giving up the second most sacks, it really doesn't make sense to go after a wide receiver. But I feel like you got to address a wide receiver. And if you could go out and get an offensive tackle in free agency, there's a couple guys available. Now here's the problem. What do you give up in a potential trade package? Because I really don't believe Emeka Egbuka is going to fall to 25. It's going to be really difficult, and Chip Kelly going to the Texans would help the odds of Egbuka coming to Houston, but I put it on the screen already, and this right here, if anyone can really see it, this is the draft board from a mock draft, and it's very tight. The receiving room after Teteroa McMillan, Luther Burden, and then it's kind of Emeka Egbuka. And then maybe Matthew Golden's a good option at 25 for the Texans. And Matthew Golden and Emeka Egbuka, probably I would give the edge to Egbuka, but they're both great receivers. The problem I have with Golden is the fact that he doesn't have chemistry with Stroud. When you have like a Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow connection that you had at LSU, you want to bring that to the NFL. And I feel like it's only been adapted more and more now to where you want to get your quarterback the guy he wants, the guy he loves. And although you could probably trade for Garrett Wilson, who was there on Ohio State with Stroud, you could also get Emeka Egbuka, who's a great option as well. So if we don't see a potential trade package for Garrett Wilson or a potential big signing with T. Higgins and trading the offense around, that's the only thing. Now, potential trade, let's bring it up because if I could find it, here we are. The Texans don't have any cap. They don't. And looking at the top 3 guys on the biggest contracts I've ever seen in my life, Laremy Tunsil, $28 million cap hit. Titus Howard, he's been playing, he's technically a tackle, but he played guard for most of the season. He's making $23 million a year. Nico, 18, that's decent. Diggs, I mean, what do you expect? He's on a 1-year contract. You could void his contract, but from what I'm hearing, a veteran presence, they're probably just going to bring him back. They love his energy in the locker room, so that's probably a definite. Now, the 2 guys I would love to get rid of is Shaq Mason, who is a potential $10 million cap hit. Shaq Mason's only getting older. He's a veteran. He was injured most of last season. It's going to be difficult to continue the offensive line with poor offensive line play already. And he's a middle-of-the-pack type of guard. You don't need him on your team. And then trading Kenyon Green, who was a 15th overall selection, who was honestly probably one of the worst picks from the Texans, that'll be another $2 million you can get rid of. The biggest thing that I do not understand is why Dalton Schultz is making $14 million a year or cap hit. It just doesn't make any sense. So trade Schultz if anybody wants him. That's the problem. I don't know if anybody needs a tight end or wants to take on that salary. And if you get rid of Schultz, that's another $11 million in cap. So you have to be able to package something in order to trade up. Do you give up a future second? Do you give up a future first in order to trade up 10, 15 spots and get Emeka Egbuka? Because looking at the trade here, you would have to leapfrog the Steelers or maybe the Falcons or even the Cardinals could take a receiver. The Seahawks could take a receiver. The Buccaneers probably won't, but you never know. The Broncos could take a receiver. All those teams right there can take receivers, and it's not something you want to do. When I'm looking at the rumors as to why Emeka Egbuka is linked to the Texans, yeah, it makes sense. He's a good route runner, but the biggest problem I have is that they said he might go in the 2nd round of mock drafts, which I think is crazy. If you think Emeka Egbuka is going to drop past the middle of the 1st round, that's crazy. It's crazy talk. So it's almost not likely at all for Egbuka to drop the 25, but the potential possibility of reuniting Stroud with Stover and Egbuka, and you trade Schultz, and now Stover's your starting tight end, that's perfect. Because then it gives Stroud the ability to have chemistry with his players, also elevate the offense, bring in Chip Kelly, and change the identity of this team. Now, the Texans have interviewed a lot of candidates. They've gotten Gerard Johnson, the current quarterback coach. They're also looking at the Rams offensive line coach, the Saints offensive. So there's a lot of potential guys that they're looking at, and they're trying to make the right decision on what do they want to do with this offense, because it was supposed to be something special. And you can blame it on the injuries. You can blame it on Stroud having a down year. But I really do believe that the biggest problem with this Texans offense wasn't the injuries, wasn't everything else that went wrong. It was the play calling, because all the plays took terrible long to develop. And when you have so many long developing plays, you can't make anything out of anything. So that's the biggest problem with why the Texans fired Bobby Slowick. You have to get rid of him. You have to now trade up for Egbuka if you want to get him. If you want to be aggressive, go out and get T. Higgins, because that would be a great signing. T. Higgins would be perfect fit. Well, I mean, any big-name receiver, you would love to be a perfect fit. Egbuka's probably the best perfect fit. But in general, hypothetically, if we could make it happen, I would love to get T. Higgins. I would love to get rid of Stephon Diggs just because of the contract and the injury and the uncertainty there. Bring him on for less, sure. But overall, what is your thoughts on the Egbuka potential link to Houston? I think it's definitely kind of crazy because it's a long shot for the Texans to trade up and leapfrog the Steelers, who are almost in definite contention for Emeka Egbuka. And not only that, but you have to look at the fact that there's a lot of teams that need receivers, and this is a receiver-loaded draft class. So do the Texans play aggressive and trade up for C.J. Stroud's teammate at college? It'll be something interesting to see, and I feel like this is what the Texans need to do. This is something that they should do, they've been trying to do, and Joe Mixon has kind of hinted at Nick Caserio having to play with fireworks. But again, there's a lot that could happen. There's a lot that the Texans could or could not do. We could potentially see a reserved offseason, and the Texans don't get Egbuka. They don't get T. Higgins, and it's just Nico Collins and the same kind of team we saw last year because the team doesn't have any money. But on the other hand, you could also see the whole offensive line get traded, Dalton Schultz get cut or traded, and try and get as much money as you can, sign all these players, and go big in free agency. There's a possibility of that. But this isn't Madden. This isn't a rebuild process. As much as I would love to tear down the whole offensive line and kind of rebuild and just absolutely go haymaker with getting big-name receivers and helping Stroud have this just have him conduct his own offense and bring in Chip Kelly. It's just, a lot of it seems unlikely. And as much as, again, I would love to have Egbuka, I would love to have Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, one of those receivers, those would be huge. But the likelihood is not a big chance. It makes the most sense. They should do it, but that doesn't mean they will. So there it is. Emeka Egbuka, linked to the Texans. He definitely should be a Texan, but it's going to be a tough road to go get him. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, but I think it'll be crazy if the Texans can make some big moves and trade up in the draft, maybe get a big-name wide receiver. We will see. But let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.